The classic American smash burger relies on an intense, crispy sear. The traditional Mexican taco utilizes the soft, folded embrace of a warm tortilla. For decades, these two culinary pillars existed on completely separate menus. In March 2023, recipe developer Brad Prose pushed a ball of raw ground beef directly into a flour tortilla on a hot griddle. Within days, the resulting recipe accumulated millions of views across social media platforms. On screen, the process looks effortless. You take raw meat, smash it into dough, flip it, and fold it. But the physical reality is highly demanding. Burger historians like George Motz point out that achieving the proper sear on a patty is a precise art form, even before you introduce a tortilla into the equation. Miss a step, and you're left with a soggy, unappetizing mess. Worse, applying the wrong hardware to this technique can permanently destroy your cookware or expose anyone eating the dish to severe foodborne illness. Executing this popular recipe requires ignoring the social media hype. To get it right, you have to treat the process as a strict exercise in culinary science and thermal management. The first hurdle is the cooking surface. In a typical kitchen, a standard pan works perfectly well for a leisurely sauté, but smashing a burger requires massive thermal mass. Many home cooks instinctively reach for a nonstick skillet. That is a chemical mistake. The coatings on standard nonstick pans begin to degrade and release toxic gases when surface temperatures reach between 400 and 500 degrees Fahrenheit. To safely hold the extreme heat required for this dish, you have to swap the nonstick for a heavy cast iron or stainless steel skillet. This diagram illustrates a chemical process called the Maillard reaction. When the surface temperature of the meat crosses the 300-degree threshold, amino acids and reducing sugars rapidly react, forming a dense, deeply browned crust. If we update this diagram to look at the dough, you can see why the ingredients matter. The proteins in the beef will readily form a molecular bond with the gluten in a flour tortilla. If you try this with a corn tortilla, that bond fails and the meat separates. Securing heavy-duty hardware to safely reach high temperatures and choosing the right dough provide the physical foundation that actually allows the meat and tortilla to fuse. With the griddle hot, the prep begins. You portion out 3 ounces of 80-20 ground beef, place the flour tortilla on top, and use a heavy metal press to flatten them both into a razor-thin layer. Under that immediate, intense pressure, the searing heat forces the beef proteins to interlock with the flour dough, linking them permanently. But flattening raw ground beef so severely creates an invisible biological threat. Ground meat carries a high risk for E. coli and salmonella, and cooking it in under 2 minutes leaves very little margin for error. This technical document from the Food Standards Agency outlines the strict safety requirements for cooking burgers. As highlighted here, the smashed patties must reach a minimum internal temperature of 75 degrees Celsius. To ensure that target is met, you have to rely on a sanitized probe thermometer. And as the document further dictates, you must use completely separate cutting boards and utensils to prevent the raw meat juices from cross-contaminating the cooked food. Once the temperature is verified, you execute the flip. Crucially, the patty must be moved to a cool zone on the griddle. If the bare tortilla sits on the extreme heat, it will overfry, become brittle, and shatter when you try to fold it. By validating the internal temperatures and adhering to strict bacterial protocols, a highly risky handling of raw meat becomes a structurally sound, thoroughly safe meal. With the crust fully developed and the tortilla still pliable, the final components come together. A slice of melting cheese bonds to the caramelized meat, followed by a generous layer of classic, tangy burger sauce. Because the fusion of meat and dough relies on heat and pressure rather than a specific flavor profile, the technique acts as a highly flexible culinary blueprint. Home cooks adapt it to fit strict dietary needs. Plant-based mince and dairy-free cheese recreate the texture for vegans, while high-protein wraps substitute the flour for those following a keto diet. Curious, this flexibility raises a persistent question among culinary enthusiasts. With the flavors of a classic cheeseburger wrapped in the physical form of a taco, it's difficult to categorize exactly which family the final product belongs to, but the concept itself has deep roots. Long before internet trends existed, street vendors in Mexico City, like the ones operating in the era captured in this vintage photograph, served hamburguesa tacos as a recognized regional staple. The Smashburger taco survives the rapid cycle of internet fame because of what it demands from the cook. It requires an understanding of thermodynamics, strict adherence to food safety, and a nod to a long history of cross-cultural adaptation.